was focused on, and here is what we have learned so far. Spicer says he is not at liberty to comment on the New York Times report that two White House officials played a role in providing surveillance docs to Representative Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. The White House also says it can't get into House intel sources. They also say a new letter was sent to the heads of both intel committees. Staffers on both Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff's teams both confirmed that they received those letters. All of this as the Senate Intel Committee holds its first public hearing into Russia's efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. As usual, we've got our team of correspondents and analysts here to break it all down. And let's first start with Peter Alexander, who was in that White House press briefing. Peter, notable today that Sean Spicer refused to confirm or deny this New York Times report when just the other day he flatly denied a Washington Post report saying that the White House blocked Deputy AG Sally Yates from testifying in the House. Should we take anything out of that, his refusal to deny this report?
Yeah, Katie, it was striking his deflections here, specifically on this day. What struck me, though, was the specificity of the fact that he was on this day revealing that this information was now going to be provided to the bipartisan leadership of the House and Senate Intelligence Oversight Committees. But he has not explained why Devin Nunes would have had access to this information ahead of time, why specifically Nunes would have received this information that, in effect, would have helped exonerate one of the subjects of Devin Nunes' own investigation, a question that remains unanswered on this day. As he was walking out, I tried to get a sense of timing when they found these intelligence reports, this intelligence that they would be providing. He didn't answer that question right now, but that question of timing is striking. It seems very convenient, of course, to people that are skeptical of the way the White House has handled this situation, that on this day, Sean Spicer would say they had just hours ago sent information to the bipartisan leadership of those two oversight committees. Katie?
And we are efforting one of the authors of that New York Times article, Matt Rosenberg, who's just getting in the chair for us as fast as he can over at the New York Times. But we do also have Nick Confessori here, also of the New York Times, to talk about in general Sean Spicer and why the White House cannot say simply who let Devin Nunes into the White House grounds. Usually that's something that's very easy to reveal. That's not a secretive thing. But also the other day, Sean Spicer talking about who could have potentially played a role in getting Nunes this information.
Well, look, on Tuesday, Spicer said in the briefing, in a manner that seemed hypothetical, he was talking about two sources who may have given intelligence. And now it seems like perhaps that was a leading answer, and it raises the question if the White House has actually known all along exactly who these sources were, which then gets them into the problem of who authorized those two people to provide the intelligence to the House chairman.
A reminder that NBC News has not confirmed this reporting, but we do have Matt Rosenberg, who is one of the co-authors of that report. Now, Matt, talk to me about what you guys were able to uncover and the names of the two White House staffers that helped, according to your reporting, Nunes get in to see that information.
We've been told that, so there were two people. There was a guy named Ezra Cohen Watnick, who's a former Defense Intelligence Agency official. He's what's called the Senior Director for Intelligence in the National Security Council. He can see almost everything. And we're told that he began to look for this intelligence, or found it after Mr. Trump tweeted about being surveilled by the Obama administration. There's some disagreement among our officials. We've got one who's saying this was part of an effort to find a post facto justification for Mr. Trump's tweets. There's another official saying they were just doing a review of how intelligence is shared in the White House, and they came across this information. Either way, they did come across it, and we're told that it was Mr. Ellis. His name is Michael Ellis. He is a lawyer who's in the counsel's office of the White House, who until a few weeks ago was the general counsel for the House Intelligence Committee, which is, of course, the committee led by Mr. Nunes. We're told that it was Mr. Ellis who then provided or allowed Mr. Nunes to view the information.
Now, while NBC News cannot confirm this, what we can confirm from multiple sources is that Ezra Cohen Watnick, who is one of the senior directors in the NSC, H.R. McMaster, the new National Security Advisor, at one point did try to push him out, saying that he believed, according to our sources, that he was in over his head, but that Ezra Cohen Watnick complained to Steve Bannon, and Donald Trump ended up securing his role there above the head of H.R. McMaster. That's NBC News' reporting. Again, we haven't confirmed the New York Times. But Elise, talk to me about the defense that Sean Spicer was making there. He's talking about process, or not talking about process. He wants to talk about substance. He doesn't want to talk about process as in who exactly got Devin Nunes' information. And now they have a new argument about why they think the Obama administration was actually spying on the White House.
Well, the second argument involving Evelyn Farkas is just complete nonsense. They've taken a clip of her speaking on Morning Joe about a story that had been published in the New York Times the previous day, where there are anonymous Obama administration officials talking about how they endeavored to make sure that the information about what had occurred that it disseminated and it wouldn't go unseen, essentially. So this is blowing up an old story that had been out there for political purposes. Secondly, going back to Spicer, today he was having quite a few problems in that press briefing. He didn't want to really answer anything. He didn't want to outright deny the story, which he would deny the Post, a couple of days ago. Mm-hmm. And he also did not want to be nailed down on who actually let in Congressman Nunes to the White House facility, which is just a simple call to the Secret Service. Let me see the visitor log for this day, and we could know immediately, and he could satisfy the public's need for information. He also had previously denied that the whistleblowers had been from within the White House. Yeah. Nunes also too. So these two individuals are now having to recant. If the New York Times reporting is corroborated, which I expect it will be, they are going to have to recant their statements.
So Casey Hunt, you're on Capitol Hill. You're tracking the reaction from Democrats. Is this something that they're going to be seizing on, this reporting out there, if it is confirmed by other sources, that the White House had two members on staff who at least played a role in getting Nunes this information?
Katie, I think that this has been long suspected, and we had started to hear these two names bubble up in conversation. And obviously, I know you've been reporting that we are still working on independent confirmation of this report. But I think this is what has been underlying the entire push to get Nunes to recuse himself from this investigation. And I think this idea that the White House provided this information and we now know more about that is simply going to amplify those calls. I wouldn't be surprised, although we have not yet gotten any reaction along these lines yet, if you have more people go farther than saying he should recuse. We've already had one Democrat based on the previous couple of days. I forget how far along we are in this week. Every day feels like 3. But she had already said that he should step down as chairman of the committee. I wouldn't be surprised if you hear more people echoing those calls. Now, we are waiting to hear from, we spoke to the ranking member Schiff of the Intelligence Committee on the House side earlier today, but of course it was a handful of minutes before this report came out. So we are waiting for more reaction from him on this. We're told he's in meetings through this afternoon. This is, of course, the day Congress flies back out because they are not in session tomorrow. So we are going to have to track some of these people down. But I think that this ultimately is going to continue the narrative that we have been talking about. And I think that's part of why the chairman and vice chairman on the Senate side, you're seeing them still in that hearing that they're having in their investigation. I think they're trying to make a very clear contrast to what's going on here and the potential contamination of this investigation with this information. Katie.
Casey, let's get right to Denny Heck, a Washington State Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, who's with us now. Congressman, give me your reaction to that New York Times report.
Well, you can't make this stuff up, Katie. Look, I can't confirm or deny or attest one way or another the veracity of the New York Times report, but I can confirm this. It absolutely makes it appear as though there has been collusion and coordination between Chairman Nunes and the White House. And look up purgatory in the dictionary. There's a video of Sean Spicer spending the entire rest of his time as press secretary answering questions about the Russian interference in the 2016 election. So my advice to Chairman Nunes, if he were to come to me, is, Devin, crack a history book. Flip to the page marked Watergate. It's not the underlying crime that gets you, it's the cover-up. The best disinfectant is sunshine. So kickstart this campaign into gear again. Call back Directors Brennan and Clapper and Acting Attorney General Yates. issue the subpoenas for records for Mr. Manafort, like his tax records and his bank statements. And by all means, will you finally turn over to your fellow committee colleagues whatever information you have about this thing that has created a great distraction from the issue at hand, which is get at the truth behind the Russian interference in the 2016 election and possible collusion or coordination with Trump officials.
Congressman Paul Ryan earlier today seemed to indicate that Devin Nunes was working on getting information to your committee about what the information he received was and who he got it from. But the chairman, Nunes, has been pretty clear that he's not going to be revealing his sources. Have you had any conversations with him about trying to figure out exactly what he found out?
We have conveyed to him in the strongest terms possible, which is why, as you will recall, Katie, last week, he looked us all in the eye and he apologized. But of course, after he apologized, we learned that he not only had been in receipt of these documents, but A, he received them on White House grounds, and B, he'd been to the White House the night before. He told us then that he would get us these documents. We are yet to receive them.
Congressman, I have one last question, but you got to answer it in 10 to 15 seconds. The White House is calling your chairman and your ranking member over to the White House to get some top secret information. What do you make of that?
I think there's a legitimate separation of powers here. We should not be coordinating in any way with the White House while we are investigating the White House. The FBI is underway, the Senate's underway, we're underway, and frankly, Katie, I'll tell you this, I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised if there are not local prosecutors now beginning to investigate some of these issues circling around Russian interference in the 2016 election, specifically Mr. Manafort's real estate deals. And one last thing, it's Final Four weekend, Katie, I got to say it. Go Zags.
Abusing your opportunity there, Congressman Heck. I appreciate it. That'll do it for me. I'm Katy Tur. Katy Tur, that's my name, in New York. Kate Snow picks things up right now. Hey there, Kate.
Katie. Busy afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Kate Snow. Top stories this hour. We're going to start just where Katie left off with that breaking news. The White House responding to a New York Times report citing several current American officials claims that 2 White House officials provided House Intelligence Chair Devin Nunes with reports suggesting the president and team members were swept up in incidental